Eli had always dreamt of becoming more than just an ordinary recruit in the human fleet. The stories told of mighty warriors, fearsome generals, and cunning strategists who led humanity to victory after victory. But for all the ambition he had, Eli still felt like a child who had much to prove but no real idea how to prove it. His mentor, Captain Naira, was a legend in her own right. Her ability to defeat enemies far more powerful than herself had earned her the respect of everyone in the fleet, and now she had called him her apprentice. Eli's first real mission would be the test that decided whether he was truly worthy of such an honor. He had been assigned to hunt down one of the galaxy's most dangerous threats, an apex hunter. The apex hunters were rare, deadly, and nearly invincible. They were considered the top predators of the galaxy, beings who could track and destroy any creature, no matter how formidable. To say that the mission was daunting would be an understatement. But Eli wasn't about to back down, not with Captain Naira watching. Naira wasn't the kind of person to coddle her apprentices. She had a reputation for pushing her students beyond their limits. Eli had heard stories of how she had made grown men and women break down in tears during their training. The kind of training that turned ordinary recruits into warriors who could stand against any enemy, no matter the odds. It was this very training that Eli had to endure, and if he failed, he wouldn't just lose Naira's trust. He would likely lose his life. The two of them stood in the dimly lit briefing room aboard the human warship Tyrant's Fury. The crew bustled around them, preparing for the mission ahead. Eli could feel the weight of his inexperience bearing down on him. He was still young, barely out of his training period, and this hunt was supposed to prove that he could stand alongside the fleet's most seasoned warriors. Captain Naira stood tall, her sharp eyes scanning the digital map projected in front of them. Her gaze was focused, unwavering. "This won't be easy, Eli," Naira said, her voice steady but cold. "The apex hunter we're after is not like anything you've ever encountered. Its intelligence is beyond anything we've seen. It's as much a hunter as it is a strategist. So don't let your guard down, not even for a second." Eli nodded, trying to suppress the rising tide of doubt in his chest. He had trained hard for this day, but nothing could prepare him for the real thing. Nothing could prepare him for what lay ahead. As they suited up for the mission, Naira took a moment to look at Eli, her expression unreadable. "I'm calling you my apprentice for a reason. It's not just because you're new or untested. It's because I believe you have potential. But potential means nothing without the will to push through. You'll need that will when the time comes." Eli clenched his fists, his mind racing. "What if I'm not ready?" he thought. "What if I fail?" But there was no room for self-doubt. Not here. Not with Naira watching. The dropship shot through the atmosphere of the hostile world they were about to enter, its engines roaring as the winds outside howled like a living thing. Below them stretched a vast, treacherous landscape filled with jagged mountains, dense forests, and barren plains. The apex hunter had been sighted on this planet, its presence leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The creature had already wiped out several scouting parties and left entire colonies in ruins. It was a nightmare, a force of nature that no one dared challenge until now. As they landed in the dense forest, the air thick with humidity and the smell of wet earth, Eli's heart raced. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for, and yet it felt like it wasn't real. He looked over at Naira, who was already making her way toward the forest's edge. She moved with the confidence of someone who had faced death countless times and emerged victorious. Eli had a long way to go before he could move like that. "Stay close," Naira commanded. "Follow my lead and don't wander off. The apex hunter knows no mercy." Eli nodded, trying to steady his breath. He could hear the sound of his own heartbeat in his ears as he followed Naira into the dark woods. The trees loomed over them like ancient sentinels, their twisted roots creating a labyrinth that made every step feel uncertain. Eli couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that every rustle of leaves, Every snap of a twig was the hunter waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The minutes stretched into hours as they advanced deeper into the forest, their path marked by signs of the hunter's passing, broken trees, shattered rocks, and footprints too large to belong to any normal creature. This wasn't just a predator, it was something else entirely, something that had evolved to survive at the top of the food chain for millennia. They reached a clearing where the ground was scarred with deep claw marks. The air was thick with the stench of blood, and Eli's stomach churned as he took in the scene. A broken transport ship lay in the center of the clearing, its hull torn open like a can of metal. The remains of its crew were scattered around the wreckage, their bodies torn to pieces. It was as if the apex hunter had done more than just kill. It had enjoyed the hunt. Eli's hands trembled as he gripped his rifle tighter, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. How could something so powerful exist? How can we possibly defeat it? Naira knelt beside the wreckage, her eyes scanning the area.
"It's close," she said, her voice low.
"Stay alert." Eli's body went rigid as he scanned the trees around them, every shadow now a potential threat. The hunt had begun. Suddenly the trees rustled, and Eli's breath caught in his throat. Something was moving. Something large. A low growl echoed through the clearing, sending a chill down Eli's spine.
"It was the apex hunter. Stay low," Naira whispered, her voice barely audible.
Eli crouched down, his instincts kicking in. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, closer. He could feel the ground tremble beneath him as the creature neared. Naira motioned for him to stay silent, her eyes focused on the direction of the sound. She knew exactly what to do. Eli, however, was still trying to shake the feeling that he was out of his depth. The hunter appeared from the trees, its massive form moving with terrifying grace. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its sharp claws scraped against the ground with each step. The creature was a living nightmare, a perfect predator that had no equal. It stopped just meters from them, its gaze locking with Eli's for a split second before it turned to Naira. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, with a burst of speed, the hunter lunged forward, its claws aimed straight for Naira. Eli's body moved on instinct. He fired his weapon, the blast ringing out in the still air. The shot missed, but it distracted the apex hunter just long enough for Naira to dodge its lethal strike. The hunter turned toward Eli, its glowing eyes narrowing in fury. It was now focused on him, and Eli could feel the weight of its deadly gaze. "Run!" Naira shouted, drawing the hunter's attention away from Eli for a moment. Eli didn't hesitate. He sprinted through the forest, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no plan, no strategy. He was running purely on instinct. Behind him, he could hear the predator's footsteps gaining ground. The sound of its growl echoed through the trees, and Eli knew that the moment he stopped, it would be the end of him. His legs burned as he pushed himself harder, but the apex hunter was relentless. It wasn't just chasing him. It was playing with him. It was savoring the hunt. Eli burst into another clearing, his breath ragged and his body drenched in sweat. He turned just in time to see Naira standing in the center of the clearing, her weapon raised and ready. She had been waiting for the right moment. With a single shot, she fired at the apex hunter, striking it in the side. The creature screeched in pain, but it didn't stop. Instead, it charged. "Now, Eli!" Naira shouted. Eli hesitated for a fraction of a second before he realized what she was asking him to do. He had to finish the job. He had to fight back. He drew his knife and sprinted forward, his fear replaced by a surge of adrenaline. The apex hunter was close now. Too close. But Eli had learned one thing from Naira. Sometimes, the only way to survive was to take a leap of faith. With a roar, he threw himself at the apex hunter. Eli's breath came in ragged gasps as he stood frozen in the clearing, watching Captain Naira prepare for the next move. His body was covered in sweat, his heart still racing from the wild sprint he had made to avoid the apex hunter. He could hear the sound of its growl echoing through the trees. each footstep heavy and filled with danger. The forest around them felt suffocating now, alive with the eerie tension of the hunt. Naira moved swiftly, never taking her eyes off the apex hunter. She was calm, composed, as if she had seen this all before. Eli felt like a rookie next to her, and he had to fight the urge to ask what to do next. He had trained for years to be ready for this moment, but he had no idea how to face a creature like this.
"This isn't a fight you can win with brute force alone," Naira said, her voice steady as she adjusted her weapon. "You need to outsmart it, Eli."
Think. Watch for its patterns. Eli nodded, still trying to steady his shaking hands. His pulse was still racing from the earlier encounter, and the weight of what he was facing kept pressing on his chest. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't ready to lead a hunt against one of the deadliest predators in the galaxy. He had never fought something that could match his intelligence, his cunning, and his strength. Naira seemed to sense his doubt, and she glanced back at him, her eyes narrowing.
"You're stronger than you think. The only thing holding you back is your fear."
Fear. He had feared failure, the judgment of his peers, and the cold, harsh reality of life in the fleet. But standing here, faced with the apex hunter, he realized that his fear wasn't just about failure, it was about his own inadequacy. He had doubts about his abilities, doubts about his worth. And that was something Naira could see. For a moment he felt exposed, vulnerable. But Naira didn't wait for him to sort out his feelings. She was already moving ahead, beckoning him to follow. "Focus on the mission, Eli."
"You're not just fighting for your life. You're fighting for the future of the fleet."
He took a deep breath and followed her into the trees. The silence that hung between them was oppressive, and Eli couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond the edge of their vision, watching, waiting. They continued their trek through the dense forest, moving with purpose. Every step felt calculated, every sound amplified in the stillness. Eli's senses were on high alert, but it felt like they were chasing shadows. The apex hunter was fast, unpredictable, and smart. It wasn't just a beast. It was a tactical genius, and it was testing them at every turn. Naira stopped suddenly, her hand raised to signal Eli to remain quiet. They had reached a large clearing, where the trees were sparse, and the ground was scattered with debris. At first glance, it appeared to be empty, but Naira wasn't fooled. She crouched low, her eyes scanning the ground carefully.
"The apex hunter has already been here,"
she murmured, pointing to the ground. "Its tracks are fresh. It's watching us." Eli leaned forward, peering at the ground. There, barely visible, were the marks of the creature's claws, sharp and wide, cutting through the dirt like a hot knife through butter. The apex hunter had been here, and it was close. The realization sent a cold shiver down Eli's spine. It wasn't just hunting them, it was studying them. Naira's voice cut through his thoughts. "Stay sharp. It knows we're here, but it wants us to think we're winning. The apex doesn't just fight, it plays the long game." Eli nodded, his nerves on edge. The idea of being hunted, of being a mere piece in a game played by an intelligent predator, unsettled him. He was used to being in control, used to having the upper hand in any situation. But here, in this alien world, it felt like the tables had turned, and the hunter had become the hunted. The two of them continued to move, careful to avoid making unnecessary noise. Naira led the way, her every step measured, her senses sharp. Eli followed, trying to mimic her movements, but it wasn't easy. The forest seemed to shift with every step they took, as if the apex hunter had designed the terrain itself to confuse them, to mislead them. Hours passed, the sun dipping low in the sky, the temperature dropped, and the forest became darker, more ominous. The only sound was the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of an alien bird overhead. But Eli could feel the weight of the silence, the anticipation that hung thick in the air. The apex hunter was still there, watching, waiting. As they moved deeper into the forest, Naira stopped once again. She motioned for Eli to kneel beside her, and he obeyed without question. They were near the edge of a dense thicket, and Naira's eyes scanned the area ahead of them. "It's close," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Get ready." Eli's grip tightened on his weapon. He could feel the sweat beading on his forehead, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment he had been preparing for, and yet he felt anything but ready. The apex hunter was out there, somewhere, and it was only a matter of time before it made its move. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the trees. Eli's head snapped around, and his eyes went wide as a massive shadow darted through the underbrush. The apex hunter had made its move. Without thinking, Eli lunged forward, his weapon aimed at the shadow. He fired once, twice, but the creature was too fast. It vanished into the trees, leaving only the echo of its presence behind. Eli's heart raced as he tried to steady his breath. It was here. It was close, but he had missed. Naira's voice was calm, almost soothing, as she spoke. "It's testing you, Eli."
It's testing your reaction time. You can't just shoot at shadows.
You need to anticipate its movements. Eli cursed under his breath, his frustration mounting. What?
He had missed. The one chance he had to prove himself, and he had failed. But Naira didn't seem upset. She didn't scold him. She just gave him a small nod and a silent signal to move forward. They continued through the forest, their every step now deliberate, their senses straining for any sign of the apex hunter. The tension was unbearable, and Eli could feel the weight of it pressing on him. The silence of the forest felt suffocating, as though the air itself was thick with danger. After what seemed like hours, they reached a narrow gorge. The ground was uneven, and the trees grew in a way that made it nearly impossible to move quietly. But Naira moved like a shadow, her feet barely making a sound. Eli followed, trying to keep his movements as silent as hers, but the strain was starting to get to him. His muscles ached, and he was starting to lose focus. Suddenly, Naira stopped, holding up her hand again. Eli froze, his eyes searching the darkness. Ahead of them, the ground sloped downward into a deeper part of the gorge. There was a low growl in the distance, a sound that made Eli's blood run cold. The apex hunter was there, somewhere in the shadows, and it was ready for them. Naira turned to Eli, her expression focused. "This is it."
The next move is yours. Think, Eli.
The hunt is won with more than just strength. It's about strategy. You need to anticipate its every move. Eli swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. The hunt was far from over, and the real challenge was just beginning. He nodded, taking a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. The forest grew darker with each passing moment, and the chill in the air seemed to press closer to Eli's skin. He could feel the weight of his exhaustion, but there was no time to rest. The apex hunter was near, and Eli knew that if he faltered, if he allowed his fear to overwhelm him, it would be the end. This was his moment, the moment where he would prove whether he could truly stand alongside Naira, or if he was just a boy playing at war. Naira's movements were fluid, her every step purposeful as she guided him deeper into the gorge. Her eyes were sharp, constantly scanning the surroundings, picking up on details Eli would have missed. She had been tracking predators like this for years, and Eli felt like a rookie next to her, his hands still trembling from the earlier chase. He had thought he was ready, thought that the training he had undergone would prepare him for this, but facing the apex hunter up close was entirely different. The creature was no longer a distant threat. It was here, hunting them, circling like a wolf waiting for the right moment to strike. Eli's grip tightened on his rifle. His senses were on high alert now, every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sending his heart into overdrive. He couldn't afford to make a mistake, not now.
Naira stopped suddenly, crouching low, her eyes narrowing as she studied the surroundings.
"It's close," she whispered. "Very close? You'll need to act fast. Eli's stomach twisted as he tried to steady his breathing. He didn't feel fast, and he didn't feel ready. But Naira had trusted him with this, and he couldn't let her down. He swallowed hard, trying to push his fear down, trying to focus.
I'll do my best, he whispered back, his voice barely audible.
The words felt too small for the moment, but they were all he had. The silence between them stretched, and for a moment, everything felt like it was suspended in time. The air felt thick, charged with anticipation. Then, suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and Eli's heart skipped a beat. The apex hunter was here. Its presence was unmistakable, a shadow that loomed just beyond the trees, too fast for the eye to track, too cunning for the mind to understand. A low growl echoed from the darkness, and Eli froze. He could hear it now, the steady rhythm of the hunter's steps, the soft whisper of claws scraping against the ground. It was circling them, trying to find an opening. It wasn't just hunting for prey, it was hunting for weakness. Naira's voice broke through his thoughts, calm and steady. Stay low.
Stay quiet. It's studying us.
Eli's pulse raced as he followed her lead, crouching down beside her, his body barely making a sound against the rough terrain. He could feel his heart beating loudly in his chest, and he hated how obvious it felt. He hated that the hunter would be able to hear it, but Naira didn't seem to mind the noise. She was the calm in the storm, the eye of the chaos that was coming. Then, it happened. The apex hunter emerged from the shadows, its massive form slipping through the trees with unnatural grace. Eli could barely make out its shape, but he saw the glowing eyes first, eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness and lock onto his. For a moment, everything went still. The creature's gaze was sharp, calculating. It wasn't just a monster, it was an intelligent being, capable of understanding fear, capable of recognizing its prey. Eli's breath caught in his throat, and for a brief second he felt the pull of instinct. Run, hide, escape. But Naira's voice was in his ear, urging him to stay, to face it. The apex hunter's growl grew louder, and Eli could feel the ground shaking with its every step. It was closer now, so close that Eli could make out its features. The creature was sleek, muscular, its body covered in dark armored scales that shimmered in the dim light. Its teeth were razor-sharp, its claws long and deadly. It was a predator in every sense of the word, and Eli was nothing but prey to it. Then, the creature lunged. Naira moved before Eli could even react, her body flowing into action as she rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the hunter's vicious swipe. Eli's mind went blank as the apex hunter spun toward Naira, its claws swiping through the air with deadly precision. But Naira was faster, always faster. She fired a shot, a single, precise blast that struck the hunter in the shoulder. The creature hissed in pain, but it didn't stop. It barely flinched. Instead, it turned on Naira, its eyes narrowing with a calculating rage. It was no longer just a beast. It was a fighter, a strategist. Eli could see the intelligence behind its movements now, and it terrified him.
Get its attention, Eli, Naira shouted, her voice full of urgency.
Now. Eli's body moved before his mind could catch up, his rifle raised instinctively. He fired. The shot missed, but it was enough to distract the apex hunter for a moment. Its glowing eyes locked onto him now, its gaze filled with pure malice. For the first time, Eli realized that the creature wasn't just trying to kill them, it was enjoying the chase. Eli's heart pounded in his chest as the apex hunter charged toward him. Time seemed to slow, and for a moment Eli felt completely helpless. He couldn't outrun it, couldn't outfight it. But then, something clicked inside of him. He had been trained for this moment. He had been trained to think, to adapt, to use his surroundings to his advantage. Eli didn't think. He just acted. He dove to the side, rolling quickly to avoid the hunter's claws as they slashed through the air where he had been moments before. The apex hunter roared in frustration, and Eli took his chance. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes scanning the environment for any advantage. Naira was already on her feet, moving with the grace of someone who had done this 100 times before. She fired again, this time hitting the apex hunter in the leg, slowing it down just enough for them to regroup. Eli watched, his eyes wide with awe as Naira's movements became more fluid, more confident. She had fought this battle before. She had won.
Eli, don't just stand there.
"Focus!" Naira shouted. The words snapped him back to reality, and Eli focused on the task at hand. The apex hunter was momentarily distracted, its eyes now focused on Naira, but it was still too fast. Eli knew that if they didn't act quickly, they would both be dead. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the trees, using their thick trunks to shield himself from the apex hunter's view. He had learned from the best, and he wasn't about to waste that knowledge now. The apex hunter was faster, stronger, but it couldn't match his speed or his cunning. At least, that's what he told himself as he ran. The hunter followed, but it was beginning to slow. Eli didn't waste any time. He reached for his secondary weapon, a blade strapped to his side, and in one fluid motion, he unsheathed it. The apex hunter was close now, too close, but Eli knew he had to strike before it could react. He spun around just as the apex hunter lunged again, its jaws wide open, ready to tear into him. Eli swung the blade with all his might, the sharp steel catching the creature's underbelly. The hunter screeched in pain, its body jerking back as it reeled from the blow. Eli didn't stop. He lunged again, aiming for the apex hunter's neck. This time, the blade found its mark, cutting through the creature's tough hide with a sickening sound. The apex hunter let out a final deafening roar before collapsing to the ground, its body twitching as it struggled to move. Naira stood behind him, her breathing heavy as she surveyed the scene. She gave him a small nod of approval, but Eli could see the tiredness in her eyes. This wasn't over yet. "You did well, Eli," Naira said, her voice low and measured. "But the battle's not finished. This creature was only a scout."
Eli stared down at the apex hunter's body, his heart still racing from the adrenaline. It had been a battle like nothing he had ever faced.
He had survived. But Naira's words echoed in his mind. This was only a scout. The real fight had yet to begin. The darkness of the alien forest had closed in, but Eli's mind was far from the silence. The apex hunter lay before him, its massive body still twitching slightly, but there was no satisfaction in the victory. It had been too easy, too quick. Naira's words echoed in his head, and the fear that had been buried deep inside him was now rising to the surface. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He stood in the shadow of the fallen creature, his breath still coming in sharp bursts. His heart thudded in his chest, each beat a reminder of how close he had come to dying. It wasn't just the physical fight. No, it was more than that. The battle with the apex hunter was the first time Eli had ever truly been forced to face his own fears, his doubts about his worth. He had thought himself ready for this moment, but now that it was here, he realized how much he still had to learn. Naira was standing behind him, her posture calm, but her eyes were full of the kind of weariness only earned by a fight that went to the edge of death. The quiet between them felt heavy, but it was filled with something else as well. Expectation. They hadn't just won. They had survived. That was something entirely different. Naira took a slow step forward, her gaze never leaving the hunter. "You did well, Eli," she said, her voice softer than usual. "But don't get cocky. This one was just a test. A scout. The real enemy is still out there." The words felt like a punch in the gut. Eli had already put everything into this fight. His mind had been focused on just surviving. But now he understood what Naira had meant. The apex hunter was part of something bigger, something more dangerous, a force that didn't just want to defeat humanity, it wanted to erase it.
What do you mean? Wasn't this the creature we were hunting? Eli asked, still trying to wrap his head around the idea that the battle wasn't over.
Naira turned to face him, her expression serious.
This was a scout.
It was testing us, testing our strength, our ability to work together. But the real threat lies beyond. The apex hunters have an intelligence beyond ours, and they don't operate in isolation. They send scouts first, test their prey, and then, once they're sure, they strike with everything they've got. This one was just the first wave.
Eli's stomach sank as the weight of her words hit him. He had been so focused on the immediate danger that he hadn't considered what was coming next.
What if this was only the beginning? What if more were already on their way?
How many of them are there?
Eli asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Naira's gaze shifted to the horizon.
That's the real question. They don't fight alone.
They're organized, and they know how to use fear as a weapon. If we're going to stand a chance, we need to figure out what they want and what they're planning.
We need to anticipate their next move.
Eli nodded, his thoughts racing. He felt like he had just begun to understand what Naira was teaching him, but there was still so much more to learn. They weren't just fighting a creature. They were fighting an entire system, an intelligent species that could outthink them, outmaneuver them, and outlast them. How could humanity hope to win against something like that? Naira's hand landed on his shoulder, bringing him back to the present. You did well today, Eli. Don't forget that. But remember, this isn't just about strength. It's about the will to keep going, even when the odds seem impossible.
You've got that will. I see it in you.
For a moment, Ellie felt a small flicker of pride. Naira's words meant more than any praise he could have gotten. She was one of the fiercest warriors he knew, and if she saw something in him, maybe, just maybe, he was on the right path.
We need to keep moving, Naira said, breaking the silence.
The apex won't be far behind. We need to find shelter and regroup before they send more of their scouts.
This won't be the last time we see them.
The sound of Naira's voice, firm and commanding, settled something deep inside Eli. She was right. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. He wasn't sure what would come next, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't be facing it alone. The hours passed in a blur of motion and tension as Naira and Eli made their way through the forest. The battle with the apex hunter was still fresh in Eli's mind, but he kept his focus on the task ahead. They needed to find a place to rest, to regroup, to plan their next move. As they moved deeper into the forest, the dense trees gave way to a clearing, and Eli could see the distant lights of their ship flickering in the distance. They had made it through the worst of it. At least, that's what Eli told himself. But his instincts told him that this was just the calm before the storm. The real battle was still to come. Naira stopped suddenly, raising a hand to signal Eli to do the same. She turned to him, her eyes narrowing with caution. We've got company. Eli's heart skipped a beat, and his body tensed in preparation. He didn't need to ask what she meant. He had felt it too. The presence of something, someone, just out of sight. The apex hunters were still out there, and this time, there were more of them. Naira moved silently toward a nearby rock, her eyes scanning the surrounding area. Eli followed her, his movements deliberate, careful. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes now. Get down, Naira whispered. We're being watched. Eli crouched low, his eyes darting to every movement, every shadow, trying to catch a glimpse of what Naira had seen. He could feel the tension in the air, the pressure building with each passing second. The apex hunter had been fast, but they were nowhere near as fast as the ones who had trained with Naira. She moved with the kind of grace that came from years of experience, always a step ahead of the danger. And then, just as Eli was about to move again, he saw it, a figure, darting through the trees, its form too large to be anything else but one of the apex hunters. His heart stopped. It was coming for them. Eli's instincts kicked in. He raised his rifle, aiming at the moving figure, but Naira's hand stopped him. "Wait," she whispered. Eli's eyes widened, and he lowered his weapon as the figure slowed down, revealing its true form. It wasn't an apex hunter. It was something worse. The creature had the same sleek body, the same dangerous eyes, but this one wasn't just a scout. It was something more, something with a presence that felt different from the others. The figure stopped a few feet away from them, its glowing eyes scanning the area. It wasn't looking for them. It was waiting for something. Someone. It was waiting for the rest of the pack to arrive. Eli's breath caught in his throat. This was a trap. They had been lured here, and now they were surrounded. "We're outnumbered," Naira murmured, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "Stay close."
"Stay silent. We need to move when the time is right."
Eli nodded, but his heart was pounding in his chest. The trap was set, and now it was up to them to figure out how to survive it. They had no choice but to wait, to watch the creature, and to prepare for the fight that was coming. The apex hunters had shown them just how deadly they could be, but Eli wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when he had come this far. The creature's eyes flickered toward them again, its gaze sharp and intelligent. It knew they were there, and it was waiting.